Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Smack Talk. I'm Nicky, and in this little episode, I'll be walking you through kind of what selective mutism is and my own personal story with it. So, what is selective mutism? My own pretty broad definition of selective mutism is an anxiety disorder that basically prevents someone from speaking or verbally communicating to most people. According to NHS and England, selective mutism is a severe anxiety disorder where a person is unable to speak in certain social situations, such as with classmates, at school, or with relatives they do not see very often. So people with selective mutism may avoid eye contact, or they might appear nervous or uneasy or socially awkward. Sometimes they might be a little clingy, and people with selective mutism are typically more withdrawn and reserved from larger group settings. Now, this doesn't mean that people with selective mutism are naturally introverted or don't want to be involved in group settings with other people. Yes, it is true that people with selective mutism essentially have a fear of speaking to people, but that doesn't take away anything from their desire to communicate and express themselves and feel loved. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of misconceptions that people generally have about selective mutism and where those might stem from. First, many people believe that selectively mute children have been abused or suffered trauma of some sort. While this is partially true in my own story, because I developed selective mutism shortly after a traumatic accident that my family was involved in, this misconception is not necessarily true for most people with selective mutism because there's no evidence that links selective mutism to any sort of trauma. Another belief that a lot of people have about selective mutism is that it's just a form of shyness and that kids will eventually just grow out of it with time. SM is more than just shyness. It's an extreme type of social anxiety that enables a person to speak. It requires understanding and compassion. Additionally, some people believe that children with SM are less capable or less intelligent than the average child. Actually, I believe people with SM can excel academically. We are no different than anybody else, other than the fact that we don't talk in as many social situations as the average person. Possibly the biggest misconception that I have heard about selective mutism is that it is a form of autism. Now, it is possible to have both autism and selective mutism, but the two disorders are not linked in any way. I was born in 2005 in Atlanta, Georgia. For the first few years of my life, I was just like any other child. I laughed, I played. I wasn't born with SM. I was always a really happy kid. I never really cried a lot as a baby, and I've never really been the problem child. That was my brother. And then in the winter of 2007 and 2008, my family was involved in a car accident. I'm not quite sure how to explain it, but the way that my mom always explained it to me when I was younger, and the best way that I can put it into words, is that the car accident caused a switch in my brain to flip that made me stop speaking to most people. So I wasn't diagnosed with selective mutism until a couple of years after the car accident, but during that time, my family sort of noticed that I was a little bit different, and I had sort of reserved myself a little bit more than I had before. After being diagnosed with selective mutism, I tried several different therapies, and while I don't fully remember all of these treatments that I tried during my childhood, my mom does, and she's going to share with you a little bit more about these treatments.
So the timeline of when Nicholas was diagnosed with selective mutism and when we started therapy, I'm just going to review that with you. at age 4, he was finally diagnosed with selective mutism. We lived in Jacksonville, Florida at the time, but we were about to move to Charlotte, North Carolina. So we moved to Charlotte, and then soon after we moved here, before he started kindergarten, we did play therapy at the recommendation of our new pediatrician. Play therapy was helpful as far as like just getting him interaction with other people, but it didn't really do anything as far as treating selective mutism. At the end of his kindergarten year at this new school where he was starting, he did do some occupational therapy. While that was also helpful, it helped with things like his little quirks that he had. He didn't like tags and clothes, didn't like food textures, things like that. Occupational therapy was helpful for that, but it didn't address anything relating to selective mutism. We did that for about a year and a half. And then in second grade, we started doing a therapy called brain-based therapy. I have a friend who's a functional neurologist, and he started helping Nicholas with some of the issues regarding his brain. It was always discussed with us that during the car accident, something in his brain got turned off. And so this brain-based therapy really did help him. I probably saw the most change in him because his posture changed. Not only did they address the brain issues, but it helped him with his overall like demeanor. Like he was very closed off in kindergarten and first grade. Like if you were to come up to him, he would be like this. But after the brain-based therapy, or actually during the brain-based therapy, he was able to be more open. That's also the time when he started playing a lot more baseball. He was now on a travel baseball team, and instead of being so like closed off, he was a lot more open, which helped the coaches, be able to approach him. You can imagine a coach trying to approach a kid like this. It just helped him gain more confidence too, in his ability to play baseball and form relationships. Even though he didn't speak verbally, he was a little more open, and it was just better for his development. So that brain-based therapy, we did that for a couple years, and that really did do some great things for him. And then about fourth grade, we stopped that, took a break from therapies really for a long time. He picked it up again, probably the middle of middle school. He started working with a local counselor here, that really more of like life coaching. That helped him just, he had some challenges communicating with other people, even though he was able to communicate with a whiteboard and his phone app. People maybe didn't get the inflection on things, because when he's writing it down, you just don't always get the understanding of what the person is trying to convey. So I think she helped him a lot with that. She helped him with a lot of life issues as well, being a middle schooler. And then fast forward a little bit to his junior year, he did the community camp that is sponsored by the Smart Center in the Philadelphia area. That was life-changing. That is really where he found the breakthrough that he needed, because he was always so stuck, couldn't get past that nonverbal with so many people. And then that really was the breakthrough that he needed. So that treatment ultimately is what we all feel like was his break point. And then with that, we did a local therapist here in Charlotte, North Carolina, who specializes in selective mutism. So we followed up the camp with this person, and she has been instrumental in keeping the momentum going from community camp and allowing him to really continue the breakthrough.
So throughout my years in school, I've really excelled year in and year out without ever really having spoken in a classroom before. I think a lot of that stems from the accommodations that my teachers have been willing to provide me over the years, and just how comfortable that my schools have made me feel. I've had a 504 plan implemented throughout basically my whole academic career, and that just allows me to have some special accommodations in the classroom and at school. For example, I'm allowed to use a personal whiteboard where I can write something down and show it to my teacher to sort of act in place of me speaking. And I've also been allowed to have sort of a buddy system. That was mainly in my younger years of school, but my school would essentially work around me to make sure that I had a friend in my class who I was comfortable talking to if I needed to speak to someone. My teachers always loved me, not just because I don't cause any trouble in the classroom, but also because of my personality that they get to see through the ways that I communicate in class and my work. Still, it's not the same as anybody else. Although I'm made as comfortable as possible in the classroom, it's this sense of comfortability that's getting in the way of me making progress past SM. I've really come to realize this over the past couple of years, and I've been working extremely hard to sort of cross that barrier of verbal communication in the classroom and in other social situations. So at school, I have faced bullying in the past. I have been picked on for not being able to stand up for myself. For the most part, it was early on in middle school. I feel like people stopped picking on me once they really got to know me and see my personality shine. I mean, let's face it, school is hard enough on its own, so getting picked on for something that you can't necessarily control kind of sucks. But I have been extremely lucky enough to make some pretty amazing friends at school and at church. My friends have honestly been some of my biggest supporters throughout my entire journey with SM, and I really couldn't imagine where I would be without them. I would definitely not be in the place that I'm at now without the support of all of my friends. Although I don't verbally communicate with all of them just yet, they have always shown me love, support, encouragement, and given me motivation every single day to speak with them before we part ways after high school. Actually, one goal that I'm acting upon right now is that I'm sending videos of me speaking to one of my closest friends at school. I can share a little bit more about this in a later video, but essentially I am working up to the point of being fully verbal in person with him by sending these videos as a sort of intermediate step between communicating non-verbally with him and speaking with him. So like I've said before, I've been playing baseball for most of my life. I was introduced to the sport and fell in love with it at a really young age, and I was super eager to start playing once I turned 5 years old. Over the years, baseball has honestly been my outlet where I can let out my stress, my anxiety, and my frustration about SM and some other things going on in life. And I feel like playing baseball really allowed me to feel like a normal kid. I've always been nonverbal on the baseball field, but that has never stopped me from playing the game that I love. Throughout most of my baseball career, I've had my dad as my coach, but even with him coaching, I've come up with some pretty creative ways to communicate non-verbally on the baseball field with other teammates and my coaches. So for instance, for any of you who know how baseball works, I'm typically a shortstop or second baseman, so I'm a middle infielder, and one thing that I usually do is to call people off, I usually just wave my arms in the air, and then one of my coaches sees me and yells out that it's my ball, and the other person backs off or something like that. Other than that, I usually signal with my hands to the other fielders to kind of let them know like what our defensive alignment is or kind of what I'm thinking, and typically they kind of understand what I'm trying to say. So I'm very thankful for all of my teammates over the years for sort of understanding me. But I think that it's really important to stay involved in some of these activities that make you feel like a normal kid with SM. Baseball has just been a part of my life, and honestly, I can't imagine myself without baseball. I have also been going to church my entire life. I was involved in Sunday school as a smaller kid, and that was where I really first learned the Gospels. And I've attended regular church services with my family for many, many years. I was even baptized when I was about 8 years old. But I never really had a full understanding of what the point of any of this was, or why it's so important to follow this Jesus guy until just a few years ago. Now, I'm not going to get all religious in this video, but I will say that deciding to go to youth group at my church was one of the best decisions I've ever made. That was where I really believe I came to Jesus for the first time. I've made some of my closest friends at youth group and have made some of the fondest memories with those people. Okay, so I will come back and talk about my personal story with SM in the next video and sort of how I've overcome it over the years. But for right now, I'd like to offer a piece of advice to the parents out there who have kids with SM. Parents, probably the best thing that you can do is advocate for your kids. Be their number one supporter and always let them know that you're right there with them every step of the way. As someone who's gone through this, it's so powerful to know that my parents are right there with me whenever I need them. And it's so important to listen to your child with SM because no one knows them better than they do. Additionally, I would encourage you to educate your child's school about SM using some online resources like things from the Smart Center's website or from the Selective Mutism Association so that your child's school can be more equipped to kind of work around your child's condition and make their learning environment as normal as possible. Also, it was super helpful for me, especially in elementary school, when my mom used to reach out to my school before the year started so that I could come into the classroom and kind of get a feel for how things would work. Plus, I got to meet my teachers early so that they knew who I was once the school year started and they could better accommodate me in the classroom. In middle school, I used to send some letters to some of my teachers before the school year started so that they could sort of get to know me a little bit better. And in these letters, I would kind of explain what SM was and offer them some tips on how to communicate with me in the classroom. Parents, I would also encourage you to really push your children with SM to get involved with clubs at school or a youth group at church, try a sport, or even just setting up a playdate with a neighbor. Taking these small steps to expose your children to other kids their age can ultimately become a huge confidence booster in their own communication skills. Lastly, I cannot stress enough how important it is to engage your kids in normal activities and also place them in situations that encourage them to speak while still supporting them and motivating them every step of the way along their journey. One of the worst things that you can do as a parent is to isolate your kid from other kids because that just limits their ability to effectively communicate even further. Looking back on it, without being put in those uncomfortable and quite honestly overwhelming situations, I would have never had that sense of motivation or that voice in my head telling me, hey, maybe you should speak here so you can actually contribute to what's going on around you. If you take away nothing else from this video, I really hope that you take away these two things. Number one, advocate for your kid. Don't be afraid to make a conversation about selective mutism with your child's school, or with your coworkers, or with neighborhood friends, or with anybody else around you, so that people are more aware of what SM is and how they can communicate with your child in a way that doesn't overwhelm or degrade your child. And number two, listen to your kid. Like I said, they know themselves so much better than you think you might know them. So listen to what they tell you about what they're feeling and offer them compassion through everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. In the next video, I will talk a little bit more about how the Smart Center played such a pivotal role in my story in overcoming selective mutism. Stay tuned, and I'll see you later.